Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I will be taking on the totally original idea, totally not stolen from Airtime Thrills, of reviewing the biggest wins and losses of my new for 2022 credits. This isn't a ranking of my favorite and least favorite coasters, but rather the coasters that I didn't expect much from that wowed me, and the coasters I expected a little more from that didn't quite deliver. So we can end this video on a high note. Let's start with the losses. You might even say we're starting on a high note too, because I had to dive deep into the nitty-gritty to get a full 10 coasters for this list. Let's get into it. My number 10 loss of 2022 was the Dollywood mine train at Six Flags Over Georgia. Now, it's an Aero mine train. I wasn't expecting much to begin with, but this was profiled so weird that I think the only saving grace for this ride was how slow it ran, because if it went any faster, it would have seriously hurt. The number 9 loser is Batman the Ride, also at Six Flags Over Georgia. This was absolutely more intense than the Clone at Great Adventure, but it was more painful as well. And I'm not talking the headbanging you find on corkscrews, I'm talking headbanging on transitional elements like turns and dips. A lot of people tend to really like this ride, so maybe I just caught it on a bad day, but I was taken negatively by surprise. Number 8 for 2022 losses is the Incredible Hulk coaster at Islands of Adventure. I remember this ride being really intense and a little rough, but that was way rougher than I remember, to the point of I couldn't even enjoy the ride this time around, which sucks because it's so intense and unique. My number 7 loss this year was Reptilian at King's Dominion. I've only ridden one other bobsled, that being Alpine Bobsled at Great Escape, which is manufactured by Intamin. Janky as hell, sure, but I find that ride overall enjoyable, albeit I haven't ridden it in probably 6 years or more. Reptilian is a mock bobsled, which many people tend to prefer over their Intamin counterparts, but I did not find that to be the case. First of all, the seating arrangements were incredibly uncomfortable. You're sitting with your legs straight out in front of you with nowhere to put them. I would like to make a disclaimer that I rode in the front row and my legs are relatively short. I'm not sure if the other rows are designed differently due to there being another car in front of them, and there very well could have been footholds that my legs just didn't reach, but it was overall uncomfortable. I also found that aside from hitting the brakes, the half-pipe Intamin uses is smooth, whereas the one on Reptilian just felt weird to ride on. This ride was definitely a letdown. The number 6 loser is Tigress at Busch Gardens Tampa Bay. I've ridden 2 of these models before, Phobia and Tempesto. I only rode Tempesto once, but I don't remember being awful. Phobia I've ridden a bunch, just because it's closer to me, and it's smooth as glass. Going into Tigress, I was expecting smooth and more forceful due to the third car. But it was incredibly side-to-side shaky. Not that there was the head banging per se, because there's nothing to bang your head on, but boy, I felt it. And for such a new ride too, the newest of the 3 I've ridden, only 3 years old, I was not expecting that much shaking. Number 5 on my loser list is Voyage at Holiday Worlds. Okay, get it out now before I explain. All my friends were raving about how amazing Voyage was, how glass smooth it was. Granted, they all went during Hollywood nights and I didn't, but that shouldn't make a difference in how smooth it runs. I also rode the first ride of the day, so it wasn't even running up to its fullest potential, so for how smooth it was hyped up to be, you can imagine my shock at how it was still rough like most wooden coasters. The way I described it on Great American Scream Machine at Six Flags Over Georgia was your feet and seat are vibrating, but you're not getting whiplash or jackhammering. Of course, Voyage is taken at a much greater height and speed than Scream Machine, so that shaking is amplified. Don't get me wrong, this was by no means an awful ride, but I came in expecting glass and butter and got what felt like your typical wooden coaster. So it was kind of a letdown just given my expectations. I would love to ride again later in the day though to see if that makes any difference. My number 4 loser is Wild Eagle at Dollywood. I've ridden 3 wing coasters now, all new credits this year, and this was my 3rd one. Gatekeeper was not super forceful but incredibly smooth. I was able to ride it comfortably, already having a headache. Thunderbird was a little more forceful from the launch, but still super smooth. So you can imagine my shock, yet again, when I went into Wild Eagle expecting smooth, and got the rattle you'd expect from, say, a floorless, a sit-down, or an invert. I felt it especially in the valleys, in between elements, which is not a great feeling after experiencing 2 wing coasters that were butter smooth. Number 3 for 2022 losses is Diamondback at Kings Island. Again, not by any means a bad ride, but it still fell below the bar that had been set for me. All my friends had come back from their trip last year and basically said, "Nitro who?" So I was expecting something out of this world. The layout and the forces are amazing, especially the unique ending with the splashdown, but I guess I should have expected a ride themed to a rattlesnake to have a significant rattle. It wasn't a crazy rattle like I found on other clunky best restraints, like Hulk and most Floorlesses or the Batmans, but I still came off a ride with only a lap bar, with my head feeling a little bit shaken up. Imagine now if there were shoulder restraints on it. I thought maybe I'd just gotten a bad ride, so I rode again towards the middle as opposed to the back later in the day, and I still felt a similar rattle. So again, for what I was expecting, bit of a letdown. My number 2 loss for 2022 is Fury 325 at Carowinds. Again, this ride isn't bad by any means, but it performs significantly under expectations. I mean, this thing won Best Steel Coaster consecutively from 2016 to 2019, and I've heard so many rave reviews about it from enthusiasts all over YouTube that I was like, yes, finally I get to ride one of the best coasters in the world! And then I got off, and I was like, that just felt like if Nitro had a little spice. I won't spoil where it ranks in my top overall coasters, but let's just say that I have 9 steel coasters ranked above it, only 3 of which were not opened by 2019 when Fury got its most recent award. I gave this one another try the following day, and again, it wasn't a bad ride, but I got off wishing I had gotten more. And my biggest loser for new credits of 2022 was, by a long shot, Lightning Rod at Dollywood. If you look at almost any enthusiast top 5, 10, 25, Lightning Rod is there. I've heard nothing but good reviews, aside from I missed the original launch, and it's a little rough. So yeah, the launch itself I was prepared to be underwhelmed by, and that delivered as expected. But I had never ridden a topper track before, only the iBox, so I guess I wasn't sure what forces to expect. In all honesty, it felt like a normal wooden coaster traversing a non-inverting RMC layout. And again, coming from someone who'd only ever ridden glass smooth iBox RMCs and heard rave reviews about Lightning Rod, I was not expecting the topper track to feel much different, but boy was I wrong. Similar to the 2 previous losers on this list, I gave this ride a second chance later in the day. By happenstance, I was assigned the same row 5, but I don't really think that made a difference because I wasn't that far from the front or back. I still got off with a bit of a headache, wishing it had been better. The quad down and the bits of track they replaced with iBox are this ride's saving grace, but then I ask, why not make the investment to retrack the rest of the topper track? I mean, I get it. It costs money, and the ride would no longer be considered wooden, so any awards or records it holds regarding wooden coasters would no longer be valid, but like, a better and smoother ride experience, please. Alright, I think I've complained enough. Let's get into my 10 biggest winners of 2022. I actually had 14 winners to choose from, so briefly in no particular order, here are the honorable mentions for rides that I enjoyed much more than I thought I would. Fire Chaser Express at Dollywood, Great American Scream Machine at Six Flags Over Georgia, Kraken at Seaworld Orlando, and Millennium Force at Cedar Point. Coming in as the number 10 winner is Blue Hawk at Six Flags Over Georgia and Carolina Cyclone at Carowinds. I lumped these together because they're both loopers, one being Vekoma, one being Arrow, and my expectations versus reality were for the most part the same. I was expecting Big Ouchie, Anaconda, Loch Ness Monster, Steam and Demon. They were both way smoother than expected. Cyclone, I'm not exactly sure why. I guess it was just better profiling, which doesn't even make sense, considering it's not the oldest or youngest of the eras I've ridden. Blue Hawk runs incredibly slow, which, in my opinion, works to its advantage. I could have comfortably gotten a second ride on either of these. My number 9 winner for 2022 is Hurler at Carowinds. This is often ranked among enthusiasts' least favorite roller coasters because it's just so bad and beats you up so much. Everyone says it needs the RMC treatment, which, yes, I agree with, but Cyclone at Six Flags New England, I rode before they converted it, and that was bad. Watching POVs of Mean Streak and Hurler at King's Dominion, those look bad. So getting on this Hurler, I was expecting bad. Now, I didn't get good, but I got better than expected. It got a little jackhammery at the end, but the majority of the ride was bearable. A pleasant surprise considering I was preparing to take like 20 aspirin after I got off. Number 8 on the winner's board is Copperhead Strike at Carowinds. This ride was kind of a wild card for me going into it. I had seen POVs and heard that it was one of the better rides at the park, but I wasn't exactly sure what to expect. I wasn't expecting a bad ride per se, and I certainly wasn't expecting to enjoy it more than Fury. So this ride was a pleasant surprise. However, I had heard overall good things about Copperhead, which is why it's ranked a little lower on my winners list, unlike another Carowinds coaster that we'll talk about later. My number 7 winner for 2022 was Icebreaker at Seaworld. I'll be honest, watching POVs, seeing it advertised as family coaster, even seeing it in person, set the bar for expectations pretty low. So when I was flung out of my seat on every single launch and some of the elements afterwards, I was positively shocked. I really wish I'd gotten another ride on this. The number 6 winner for 2022 is Intimidator at Carowinds. All I had ever heard about this ride was Intimidator, so the bar was incredibly, incredibly low. Yes, some of the trends were on, but no more than on Goliath at Over Georgia or even Candemonium at Hershey Park. I got a ride on that recently, and those trims were engaged. And I was expecting this thing to crawl. Hell, part of me even hoped it would valley and we'd have to evacuate the ride. But this thing packed more of a punch than anticipated. The way I described it was, Fury was Nitro but a little better, Intimidator was Nitro but a little less, which, in the case of Intimidator, was much more than I was expecting. My number 5 winner this year is Vortex at Carowinds and Georgia Scorcher at Over Georgia. Another Carowinds Over Georgia combo. I've ridden one stand-up before this year, Green Lantern at Great Adventure, and it's bad. I'd even give it another chance when I test rode in the morning, or if I brought a new friend to the park, but it sucked. Every time. So when I was expecting Green Lantern on these stand-ups and instead got Batman, or Medusa, you can imagine my shock. Granted, these ones probably hurt less because they aren't as tall and they just don't do as much, but I almost wanted to ride again. Definitely a win in my book. My 4th place winner for 2022 is Journey to Atlantis at Seaworld, and this one actually won for not the coaster part, probably as expected. I had no idea what to expect going into this ride, but I guess like a combination of Escape from Pompeii at Busch Gardens Williamsburg and Jurassic Park at Islands of Adventure, but I wasn't expecting Jurassic Park level theming. This ride absolutely blew me away with the theming and the atmosphere and the duration too. 2 drops? My friends and I all got off after our first ride in awe and just had to ride again later to experience a second time. We chose this over Icebreaker. Easily an underrated, overlooked gem at SeaWorld. 3rd place is going to be taken by Lightning Run at Kentucky Kingdom. I'd heard good things about this ride, but I was always like, it looks so unassuming. It looks like it runs so slow. There's no way it's good as people say it is. But boy, was it as good as people say it is. Even looking at it now, it still seems so unassuming, yet some of the most powerful ejector I've ever experienced has come from that ride. And I don't think I've ever gotten that much ejector from a first drop as Lightning Run. Except maybe El Toro, but that's like an outlier. I enjoyed this ride so much. I'm really sad that they were running one train and the operations were slower than a snail in quicksand, because I would have loved to ride again, but I was not about to wait another 20 to 30 minutes for 4 cycles. The 2nd place winner for 2022 is going to be the Legend at Holiday World. So everyone had told me how Holiday World takes such good care of the rides and how in any other park, Raven and Legend would be considered elite. I also know many people would consider Legend to be the weakest of the 3. And after getting off a shakier than expected ride on Voyage, I was expecting fairly shaky for Legend too. Makes sense. But let me tell you, whatever they did during that retrack worked wonders. This thing was buttery smooth. I think the smoothest wooden coaster I'd ridden before this was Wooden Warrior at Quasi, and this ride on Legend made Wooden Warrior look like Boulder Dash. I got off wanting to get right back in line. And my biggest winner of 2022 is Mystic Timbers at Kings Island. I rode Twisted Timbers at Kings Dominion last year, and I thought to myself, that was amazing, but its sister coaster is so woody, not an RMC. I'm kind of not looking forward to riding it. I'd also heard nothing but bad things from others about the shed, so the expectations were pretty low, especially for that ending. If Legend was butter, then Mystic Timbers was buttery butter. This thing had the pacing and intensity of a ride like El Toro, granted taken on a much smaller scale, but the smoothness of an RMC. And this thing opened 5 years ago at this point, so it's not like it hasn't had some time to age. And then with my expectations for the shed so low, I was honestly very amused by what actually delivered. I enjoyed it. You know, a ride was a winner when I was expecting it to be a one and done, as most rides on the strip I'd only ridden once or twice, but I ended up riding 5 times. That's how you know you've got a winner. So that's going to do it for my biggest losers and winners of 2022. Overall, although yes, there were some losers, I think this was the best year I've had for new credits. Stay tuned in the next couple of weeks as we round out 2022 for my up-to-date coaster rankings as well as parks and bucket list coasters. Until then, thank you for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.